Hello guys, welcome to a new edition of React Today as part of the World's Web project. Many things are happening in the last 15 days since the last edition, and not very funny. It's nothing but warmongering. Again, Europe is acting like it never learned anything from the First and Second World War, and the elites of the world, as I said many years ago when I make a program about elites, it's called The Problem with the Elites. If you don't find it on YouTube, you can find it on Rumble under Oneness versus the One, number one. It's behind the title of a book by Bandana Shiba with the same name. I couldn't change it after that. I'm trying to change it. I'm going to take a look this week and see if I can change that name, because I was just trying to use a name to identify it, and I thought of Bandana because I have read her work for I don't know. I have 4 books from her, 3 books from her, and yeah. So whether Rumble or in YouTube. So yeah, the problem with the elites is the elites themselves. They're totally untrustworthy, and they are criminal. Everywhere in the world, that is a characteristic of the elites. One of the issues in the countries that have fought the elites is the Central and South Americans, but especially one of the countries that have done it, even though they have attempted to the life of the now president, it's President Gustavo Petro. You should see the lengths this person have gone for the last 20-25 years in order to protect the people. He is right now working in order to pass reforms to healthcare, reforms to labor, reforms that have been denied by Congress. Congress have shown finally, well, we always have known who has followed Central and South America development since 1492, fighting terrorism since 1492, that what he has done is sui generis in the sense that is absolutely new. It's never tried before, and that is to oppose the elites in the country. Those elites are recalcitrant. That means that they don't move. It's like a stain that is very difficult to move or remove, and that stain is filled with bloodshed for 500 years and more. So this president is trying to do reforms, and the Congress don't approve of them, even though he has called for one of the mechanisms that we can use in politics, where the referendum or a public gathering is not the name. A convocatoria pública is to call the peoples to make their own decision, and he has made some points that are going to be hopefully approved by the people, but it has to pass to Congress, the same in the majority of the democracies in this world, even whether they're parliamentarian and the House of Commons, or whether they're Senate and other forms of republic that have developed in the Western world, the chambers of Commons and etc., and the Senate. And he has fought hardly. Like I said, when he was campaigning to become president, he was shot at on his. Thankfully, the armored vehicle resisted the bullet, but it was clear that it was for him. It received a few bullets in the car when he was campaigning to become president. And that, what I mentioned, President Petro, and how South America is uniting, and how BRICS is uniting, how the countries in Africa are uniting, and how Burkina Faso, Mali, and other countries are uniting in order to defeat the colonization processes that have taken over the world for the last 500 years especially, and how the elites, as I predicted in my book, In Gold We Trust Our Path to Eternity, the beast has turned to her cubs and wants to devour them. Who are the cubs now? The cubs are European countries. And if you see van der Leyen, and you see all these people in France, in Britain, and you see the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, all of them are just trying to go to war. Prepare for war. We're going to war. Why? Because they want to do the bidding of Israel. That's it. Israel, it's after the bombardments breaking 60 days or more truce, let's say, ceasefire. In Gaza and Lebanon, they have come again killing more than 1,000 people now. And just yesterday, they bombed another hospital, killing a lot of people. They had just killed important journalists, very young, 23-year-old journalist, was assassinated by Israel with zero consequences. And they say that they are the people of God. They are the people of the devil. And because of that, I have no choice but to read you what it calls now that they say that Catholics and evangelicals have everything in common. I never have agreed on that. I will never agree on that. But the evangelical Christians and the Catholics everywhere around the world are supporting them, supposedly on biblical terms. But people that have studied Bible, I don't pretend to be a theologist or anything like that. I'm just a participant of the Catholic Church. I'm Baptist. I study catechism. I did 3 years of catechism, and I teach catechism to children in the Catholic Church. I cannot convey with the Pope, and I will not agree with the decision making of the Catholics, priests and bishops, and whomever said that Genesis 12 is excuse enough for the Catholics to go and destroy innocent people, women and children. I'm sorry, but Amalek is to happen to Israel if he keeps on pushing it, because the problem with Israel is that they believe that they're untouchable. And like I said, they have there to say, it's not me saying it, it's CNN and many others that have said that they already have knowledge of extraterrestrials and the aliens are with them and with the United States, and that President Trump knows about it. I have talked about in my program on UAPs and UFOs. You can check it on YouTube. But what the Bible says about the people of Israel, I mean the Zionists, it's not surprising. If God were your father, you would love me, says Jesus to the Jews of the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, and all the scribes, the Pharisees, the Zealots, the scribes and the Pharisees principally. There was 4 kind of people there. If God were your father, you would love me, since I have come here from God. Yes, I have come from him, not that I came because I choose. No, I was sent and by him. Do you know why you cannot take in what I say? It is because you are unable to understand my language. The devil is your father, and you prefer to do what your father wants. He was a murderer from the start. He was never grounded in truth. There is no truth in him at all. When he lies, he is drawing on his own store, because he is a liar and the father of all lies. But as for me, I speak the truth. And for that very reason, you do not believe me. Can one of you convict me of sin? If I speak the truth, why do you not believe me? A child of God listens to the words of God. If you refuse to listen, it's because you are not God's children. All right, you can read the rest in your free time. I suggest you to read John 8. I suggest you to read, I made a program on that so that you can say that I'm how do you say that, Semitic? No, I'm anti-Zionist, big time, period. All right, so let's begin with that, because today we're going to speak a little bit about the elites and how the elites have taken over the world for centuries. All the time, it's always the rich, etc. But the problem is that since we created republics, and since we have the revelation that there can be the separation between church and state, and we took away from the church the overwhelming power that was burning people on the stake, that was Giordano Bruno in the 1600. In the year 1600 was burned alive on the stake, because he dared to say that there were other civilizations out there. And then CNN says on Trump's administration, first administration, 8 years ago, that Haim Eshed, which was a general that worked for the intelligence and Mossad in the aerospace area, he said that he knows about aliens and Donald Trump knows about it just soon before he died. Like I said, he's not doing us any favors. We already know, mister. And we already know now. So even though if this is an exoplanetary exopolitics issue, for those of you who are familiar with exopolitics, it means that our politics that are beyond our planet, are beyond our solar system. So there's many issues that we can talk about it. Just take a look to my program on UAPs and UFOs, and you will get a better notion of what I'm trying to say and convey here. So the heat of the moment, of course, is the elites, because they don't represent anybody in the world but themselves. But never before as now. If you go to the days of Nero, what the Nero said when he started his own fire because he wanted to build something better in Rome, he blamed the Jews, the Christians actually, the Christians. Oh, you're the new guys in town, so we're going to blame it on you. And he blamed the Christians, and they started killing Christians like hell for 200 years. And they died in martyrdom, etc. Not the Jews, but the Christians. The Jews were the best pals of the Romans everywhere. And they are that easily convincing as they are and always have been. Cicero spoke against them because of that same reason. So as you can see, this is thousands of years in the making. These Zionist people have always existed. You remember that when Moses came back with the 2 tablets and the 10 commandments, they already have a golden calf, which is the same calf that you can see in my book. It's the same representation, it's just in the 21st century. So we need to react today to this matter, because they're not only taking the world over, they're destroying the world and the civilization that we have created. They're erasing history. Every time they go anywhere, the first things they do is sack the museums. And not only that, they erase the history behind it, which is what the United States is doing with the Department of Education. Not only him, for the last 5 administrations, the history of the slavery in the United States, the history of the injustices that the white supremacists of the United States, in their belief of that they are the elected ones because the Quakers and the Puritans came with that idea, running away from Europe persecution. They came to the United States and they named themselves after taking over the First Nations, after killing them with viruses and stuff, smallpox and others. They proclaimed themselves to be the fulfillment of the word of God, the elected ones to change the indigenous peoples because they were barbarians or savages, whatever term you prefer. They have done nothing but that. The United States is in shambles, and the people that elected Donald Trump are seriously ill mentally, because also there was no other alternative, like there is no other alternative here in Canada. The fact that I symbolically ran for Prime Minister here in Canada is to create the initiative here, guys, that Canada needs another party. Canada needs a new party, and I want to represent it, and that's what I represent in these shows. A new party, a new understanding of how Canada can lead the world in a better way. And the elites are going to be target number one. Why the elites? Because they are corrupt to the core. And not only that, their influence comes from the Israeli lobby. And the Israeli lobby is the worst enemy. It's the public enemy number one of the world right now. It's not me saying only, it's Colonel Scott Ritter. It's also Colonel and many others. Well, guess what? Duh. So the problem is that if we don't speak about the elites and we don't, our war for independence, our back is totally obvious. Why is that? Because the enemy is the enemy within, and it's not like the elites has make us believe it's communism, it's the Russians, it's the virus of the COVID-19. Is no, the elites are in position themselves, have positioned themselves throughout the centuries, never as the 20th and 21st century, in order to take over the world. And the fact that 37 states in the United States are possessed by the state of Israel, and a new documents that speak about Israel and anti-Semitism are away from constitutionality and above the constitutions and the bills of rights of anybody. We have seen that in the universities. We have seen that in the prosecution of the students right away, in the deportations to Salvador without due process. That is colonization, but this is demonic colonization. You may say, "Oh, now you're talking about demons." Okay, is there something more demonic than killing more than 186,000 people, according to the Lancet last year? Lancet says it cannot be just 33 or 40,000. Now they say that it's 50,000. The Lancet said it has to be at least 860,000 dead among the victims in Gaza. Now that they're doing the settlers are taking over the West Bank. And we already know that they beat up and almost killed one of the directors of award-winning Oscar this year. And they still have doctors sequestered, kidnapped in Gaza. In other words, it is impossible to deny that you can deny it if you want, but that only make you not only a complice of genocide, but as stupid as you can be. As stupid as you can be. You can be stupid if you want to, but here in this program we are not. And we oppose Zionism, period. Period. So do Canada. Especially when the ex-prime minister and this temporary prime minister are all Zionists, especially when the next one, if it happens to be the conservative one, Mr. Poliev, he's also a Zionist.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Plainclothes immigration agents have detained another international student without warning, Turkish national and Tufts University PhD student Rümeysa Öztürk. Surveillance video from a nearby house shows 6 masked agents approaching her on the streets of Somerville, Massachusetts, near her home Tuesday evening. She was with friends making her way to a meal to break her Ramadan fast. Tufts University's president said the school had no prior notice of her arrest and that government officials said Öztürk's student visa had been revoked. Last March, she co-wrote a piece in the student newspaper criticizing the Tufts administration's response to Palestinian solidarity protests on campus, which were calling for divestment from Israel. In a statement, her lawyer says she successfully filed a petition to block her client's removal from Massachusetts, though ICE records indicate Öztürk was transferred to an immigration prison in Louisiana. Her lawyer, who as of yesterday evening had not spoken to her client, called the situation incredibly bizarre and concerning. Over 1,000 protesters poured into Powder House Square near the Tufts campus in Somerville Wednesday. This is Leah Kayali of the Palestinian Youth Movement.
We had hundreds of Bostonians coming out here today because they are angered about what happened when one of our community members was taken by armed agents of the state who kidnapped her from outside of her home. People are here to stand up for the movement that she was punished for supporting, the movement for a free Palestine and to end the genocide in Gaza. And they're also here to continue to support our immigrant neighbors who have been getting picked up by ICE ever since, not just Trump came into office, but Biden before him and every administration. So we are out here to continue to demand a free Palestine, to demand ICE out of our communities, and to fight for collective liberation.
This comes just weeks after the arrest of Columbia graduate student Mahmoud Khalil here in New York. Another international student was detained by ICE this week. Alireza Darudi, an Iranian doctoral student at the University of Alabama, though it's not clear why he was targeted.
So, as you can see, Europe is preparing for war, and all this because of the lobby of the Zionist state of Israel, who has taken over like a metastasis. It has metastasized all over the world, and they don't want to wait any longer. They say, we're going to take the world now or never. They deny climate change. They denied everything that is happening. They want to terraform this world to become like Mars. They're destroying the Amazon. They're destroying everything that is useful for us, like everything that is green around the planet, everything that transforms CO2 into oxygen. They're killing everything around. So we cannot permit the people. That's why I'm saying that the wars for independence are back, because the enemy within is the elites, is the corporate state, and it's the politicians that accompany them, like Chrystia Freeland here in Canada, like the Prime Minister now, who has hired one of the most mediocre and corrupted persons of the Liberal cabinet that you can find during the pandemic. And many of them are going to keep being in this next Prime Minister if the Liberals win. Mr. Mendicino, who said that he was doing everything to, he only not said it, he actually did it.
This convoy is all about freedom. It's not only with the truck drivers, it's actually for every single person. You, me, buddy down the road, it doesn't matter. It's all about your free choice. That's what it should be. Like I said, if you're vaccinated, cool. You did it, well, most people did it because of work, but you know, you should do it off of free will, off of your own choice.
Across the border, and it makes things tough, that's for sure. Even being around Ontario, things are difficult. You can't get food, you can't get water, you gotta have a mask. If you don't have your mask, you can't go into stores, you can't do anything, and just like things to be normal again.
As we can see, when he accused all of us unvaccinated to be irresponsible and criminals. They are the criminals. They're acting like the Jews, lying and lying and lying about everything. So the elites are the enemy within, and we need to control them. As I have said before, anybody else for a few years now, is that we need to make a separation between church and elites. I mean, corporations. Why? Because the elites are a form of control that I have defined many years ago, 11 years ago, when I defined what is corporate state. The elites are nothing but corporate state. What is the corporate state? To corrupt, to ill, to make transfers, to do with politicians whatever they feel like, because of course the politicians make money without us knowing how they make so much money. You become a career politician. I don't know how they live so well. I mean, millions of dollars in their bank accounts. They can almost never explain where does the money come from, even though they have enormous fortunes, and they are not supposed to earn more than $300,000 a year. All of a sudden, they are billionaires. Why is that? I'm going to explain that pretty soon. But what is the corporate state, the corporate intelligence, and why is it that we are in this hecatomb? Corporate intelligence is a vast network of corporate, military, industrial complexes, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, GMOs, etc., supported by banking and financial institutions with the power to affect states and nations' outcomes through the power of capital. The use of fraud, deception, political assassinations, the use of social political elites, politicians, private mafia or army assets, and whatever is necessary that money can bribe, corrupt, or ill for particular gain or profit, referred here as they, you, or corporate intelligence. Tell me if I'm wrong. This was 11 years ago. It's very clear. It's very straight up. That's what it is. This is truth, the word of God, and this is falsehood, the devil. That's what it is. When you see Benjamin Netanyahu speaking with stupid supposed authority, saying that Iran is an enemy, we're going to see why. Like I said, the heat of the moment is what we're going to talk about today. What is the heat of the moment? Well, the heat of the moment is the intelligence appearance in the Senate of the United States a couple days ago, and how they explain the emails. And just like Hillary Clinton, everybody knows that Hillary Clinton was using insecure means of communication in order to send emails here and there to everybody, speaking about secrets of the government that she shouldn't have had. But of course the elites protect themselves. Rich protects rich, and the rest of the people can go to hell. And the lies that America tells on the daily basis are only comparable with the lies that Israel tells on the daily basis. I mean, not as always they do, but especially since the Pandora's box that 7th of October, or October the 7th, opened for us, for the country, and for the world to see, for us to see what, how deep the hole is. I have mentioned this before, how deep the hole is, the abyss is when you look to politicians and the corporate state. You see nothing but an abyss of corruption and blood and genocide over the decades, especially in the last century and the beginning of this one, which we are almost in the middle of the first quarter of the 21st century, and look at the results. Begun with 2001, and now it's spreading all over the world, because the plan of the state of Israel, the Zionist state, since der Judenstaat, I repeat, is nothing but to take the world over, and they are winning for now. But October the 7th opened the eyes of us, the people that are going to vote and are looking here in Canada, to find another way that the Liberals, the Conservatives, nor the NDP or the Green Party represents. They just said things here and things there in order for you to vote for them, but they don't change anything at all. And what is happening now is that the healthcare system in Canada after COVID-19 is becoming more and more corrupt, and is becoming easily privatized. We have spoken how a hip replacement or a hip surgery, you can get it with your healthcare for $4,000. Well, the private companies are doing it for $8,000. So,
according to the Quebec government's own data, surgeries performed at private for-profit clinics cost taxpayers 1.5 to 3 times more than in the public system.
And the result is quite clear. It can be, it is way more expensive.
From 2016 to 2020, Quebec ran a pilot project in 3 private for-profit Montreal clinics to figure out if they were more efficient. The findings were never publicly shared. But through a Freedom of Information request, researchers with an independent nonprofit found for all 5 procedures tested, costs were higher in private settings. In 2019, a short colonoscopy cost nearly $740. In the public system, it was under $300. Data also showed the public system was able to bring down the costs of most procedures over time, while costs in private clinics mostly increased.
Even on the efficiency side, we don't see an advantage at all to these private clinics.
In response, the Quebec Health Minister's office said the data is a few years old and the costs of the private sector do not include the same elements as the public. The for-profit clinics argued public institutions do not include building renovation and equipment depreciation costs.
I would take that with a grain of salt. I think we do know.
Health policy experts say hospital costs are generally fixed because the infrastructure already exists, while private clinics are duplicating services, taking staff from public hospitals, and charging more to make a profit.
I think it's really a concern.
Longhurst says Quebec and other provinces simply aren't making healthcare decisions based on evidence.
It does raise some profound questions about whether governments are serving and acting in the public interest or whether they are acting in the interest of corporations and investors.
And Christine, Quebec isn't the only province planning to use more private clinics.
Yes, we've seen other provinces, including Ontario, saying it wants to expand private for-profit care. Ontario's premier said he wants to follow the best ideas from across the country. It's just not clear what the best ideas are. We all know the healthcare system needs to change. Some surgeons are in favor of these clinics, but others will tell you there's little to no evidence that this model is the way to go. And if the goal is to reduce wait times for everyone, if you look at Canadian data, Quebec has some of the longest wait times for typical surgeries, including hip and knee replacements. We spent a lot of time digging into whether private for-profit care is cheaper, safer, and faster, and we've posted some of our findings on the National's Instagram page.
All right, Christine, thank you.
You're welcome.
When things are like this, Canada is slowing, like Europe is slowly, and like the United States is becoming and being treated like a third world country, like a banana republic. And that is very disrespectful, that name, for Europeans, because Europeans are used, like Canadians and Americans, are used to see the banana republics as always savages, people, poor people. And that poverty is caused because Canadians, Europeans, and Americans have taken over their land, displaced them, and corrupt their elites. The independence that Central and South America reached in their independences in the 1800s, during the 1800s, are nothing but a continuation of the hierarchy and the colonization, like viceroys, because the presidents elected in the new republics are nothing but corrupt elites that still obey to the colonizers, even you want to accept it or not. That is the reality. But I mentioned the president of Colombia in the beginning of the conversation because Europe, I told you in my discourses, in my public discourses, that you never thought that you were going to be conquered, Europe. The Europeans, the Americans, the Canadians, we never thought. That happened to third world countries. That happened in the global south. It's happening to us, to the continent, to the world, in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada, and the United Kingdom, and in the United States. One word, like I said in the UAPs and UFOs, colonization, dude. 37 states under the not only the influence, but the command of the Israeli lobby. That is colonization. Presidents of universities, students in universities, is nothing but the Zionists are to study in universities in Europe. The Zionists are the only ones to study in universities in the United States, according to Donald Trump and according to the last administration also.
What you're seeing here is the reaction of the people after the police came early in the morning to Batoon and get rid of the students encampment here in the University of Alberta. So, in reaction to that, we need to demand from our government our rights and freedoms. That's what this means. It's not only for Palestinians, it's for Canadian citizens themselves. It's for European, UK, European Union, New Zealand, and Australia. It's not only Palestine who is at risk here, it's all of us. Our constitutions, the right to study, the right to have a career, the right to educate yourself is at risk. If you don't support Israel, you will lose everything. How come that happened? Who has the power? How long the rabbit hole goes? How much is the power that Israel lobbyists have in universities and education? Everywhere. This is what this means.
So since Der Judenstaat, that book written by that Zionist guy, is nothing but the continuation in the Central and South American countries, which the State of Israel has everything to do with weaponry sales and espionage and training of mercenaries, because the United States didn't want to see the public opinion to see how direct they were involved. They contracted Israeli mercenaries or assassins or army soldiers in order to work in Guatemala, in Honduras, in Colombia, in order to train paramilitaries. And that is one of the things that have not been asked in the special jurisdiction for peace in Colombia, on the genocide of Colombia under the President Uribe, who's now on trial. And the Supreme Court has been demonstrated to be corrupt and has conflict of interest in the trial during these few days that has passed before, because the judge is impartial this time. So because the president has an impartial judge, the Supreme Court decided to remove. That's how corrupt the courts are, not only in Colombia and Central and the banana republics like you Europeans and us Canadians and the United Kingdom and you down in North America used to believe that we were superior and nothing's gonna touch us now. Well, we were being touched because the beast has turned to her cubs, and that is Canada, United States, New Zealand, Australia, the European Union, and the UK. You don't have to believe me. Aren't you living it? Okay, I want to give you an example of it. So that I just needed to make a little preamble in order to make you understand. This is a few hours ago, 10 hours ago. This is a publication on CNN. Just for you to know, I like to cite, of course, the source. The European Union urges citizens to stockpile 72 hours worth of supplies amid war risks. It's a document by Sophie Tano from CNN, updated 3:34 p.m. Wednesday, March 26, 2025, and it reads as it follows. European Union citizens should stockpile enough food and other essential supplies to sustain them for at least 72 hours in the event of a crisis, the European Union Commission has said. You know, the European Union Commission is nothing but van der Leyen. Liar. In new guidance released Wednesday, that is today, the Commission stressed the need for Europe to shift its mindset to foster a culture of preparedness and resilience. The 18-page document warns that Europe is facing a new reality marred with risk and uncertainty, citing Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine, rising geopolitical tensions, sabotage of critical infrastructure, and electronic warfare as prominent factors. The Brussels initiative appears to serve as a wake-up call for member states to the gravity of the bloc's security situation, and an ever-present threat from Russia has prompted European leaders to stress the need for war readiness, as has the Trump administration confrontational approach towards Europe, particularly on contributions to NATO and on the war in Ukraine, which has sparked a race on the continent to shore up its own military readiness. I have to make a comment in here. For like 4 or 5 years ago, I made a program in which I was mentioning the private corporations taking over in Germany, to the point that they have created a place where you don't know who is of the state or German state military operations and which are private corporations, military operations, trainings, and development of military industry. And that is what's going on. So, what the purpose of these guys is in order to create a new military industrial complex in Europe in order to suck $8,000 million out of the Europeans that they are going to have to pay with their own money, even though they're sending millions of euros to the Ukraine, and they want to persist on this plan for the next 5 to 10 years. I continue. The Commission's European Preparedness Union strategy says citizens across the continent should adopt practical measures to ensure they are ready in case of an emergency. This includes having enough essential supplies to last them for a minimum of 3 days, the document says, and I quote, "In the case of extreme disruptions, the initial period is the most critical," unquote. It says, "Overall, civilians should be encouraged to foster self-reliance and psychological resilience," the document states. The Commission also calls for the introduction of preparedness, quote unquote, lessons in the school curricula, including giving pupils the skills to fight disinformation and information manipulation. Look who's talking. They're telling kids to rat each other if somebody says something against the European Commission, which is van der Leyen, a person that has 6 kids and not one of them have gone to war or prove or test themselves in the grounds of war. And she's happy with it. She laughs when she's asked, "Any of your kids have served in the military?" No. And I quote again, "New realities require a new level of preparedness in Europe," unquote. President of European Commission Ursula von der Leyen said in a statement, and I quote, "Our citizens, our member states, and our businesses need the right tools to act both to prevent crisis and to react swiftly when a disaster hits," unquote. The European Commission's guidance on Wednesday comes after individual countries have been updating their contingency plans. In June last year, Germany updated its framework directive for overall defense, giving direction on what to do should conflict break in on Europe, unveiling the plans at the time. German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said they were necessary for her country to arm itself better in the face of Russian aggression. Okay, so emergency, emergency, emergency. Remember that foreign song? Ooh, ooh. Okay, emergency plans for the pandemic. Was the pandemic true? No, it wasn't. It was said at a session in the European Parliament when Mrs. Small, when asked, "Did you know if it was the vaccine was effective during COVID-19?" And she says, "No, we didn't. We just ran with the times. We didn't know." So it was a lie. And not only that, this book also told us about it. When we used to believe in him, I don't believe in him any longer, but at least he did some good research and some investigation. And not only because he said it, but because I, like you, I'm pretty sure followers of this program, whenever need the time or have the time, they can read and investigate this book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health. I used to believe in this guy, not anymore, especially when he's a Zionist and is for Zionism. And we know that 13 members of the cabinet of the President Trump are all Zionists, especially here in Canada with prime ministers and else.
I am a Zionist.
What this means is that another emergency like the pandemic, but in this case, like van der Leyen have said, Europeans have to prepare for war. That means that the cost of living is going to go way up. That means that everything is the inflation is going to rise like hell. Yeah, they're talking about a lot of jobs. Sure, war is to produce weapons, but there's many other ways to create sources of employment in the UK and in the European Union, and that is industry. Like BASF in Germany, like Volkswagen, also in Germany, and many automotive industries in Europe that have gone broke. Now, with the tariffs of the United States, this is going to get worse. Canada is going to apply 25% tariffs also to American products. He says that April the 2nd, which is Fool's Day, I believe. I don't know if it's the first or the second, whatever. But Donald Trump cannot keep playing this game because this creates in the markets. If he says, I'm going to put 25% and then withdraws the idea and then say it again, that's stupid. He says he was going to put 200% tariffs on 100% tariffs in Mexico. President of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, said, well, you put 100%, we put 200% on your products, tariffs. So this game of menacing and withdrawing is not good for economy anywhere around the world, and is showing how immature and how the second-hand government of efficiency department, guided by Elon Musk, is nothing but children guiding the most dangerous country in the world. In this case, it's the United States of America. It always has been, especially after the Second World War. The problem with the elites is that they're not trustworthy, they are corrupted to the core, and they are vain. They have no honor, like our generals and our admirals. I'm not appalled by that, but you should be generals and admirals. Shame on you. They're in the United States, here in Canada, they're in the UK, they're in the European Union, New Zealand, and Australia. Where are our generals in the European tradition? Where is the honor? Where is the value of ethics? Where is the value of truth? This book is all about it. All about it. Even though it's called In Gold, We Trust Our Path to Eternity, is based on the truth as I understand it, as I studied it, and as I see it. And it's that the truth is relative, that the truth is revealed, and the truth is absolute. All right? We can talk about the truth in another show. But this preamble is necessary because there are other urges and emergencies that Politico, for example, explains here. This is 18 hours ago, Politico. And it says, threat of war and disease means Europeans need 3-day supplies commission to warn. Europe cannot afford to remain reactive, quote unquote. The European Commission will warn in strategy to unveil on Wednesday. And you can see people already piling potatoes and everything. This is going to cost inflation in Europe. The price of food is going to go up. I wonder what the Canadian Prime Minister is going to do. Is going to do the same? Because they are talking already of spending money on defense. Like in Europe, they want us to put billions of Canadian dollars into weaponry. We don't need to do that. We need to improve our defenses, sure, but we don't need the shut-off button of F-35s, not even the French ones. We should start thinking of other ways to develop our nation. I have said it before Pierre Poilievre, Canada first. If you go to my programs before Pierre Poilievre, if you see my videos on YouTube, there's a chapter, a program that is called Canada First. I'm pretty sure somebody told him about it. Cannot be a coincidence because I am the most censored YouTuber in Canada. And I can see another program growing like hell. It showed up like less than a year ago, and in one day has 1 million viewers. And these guys are Zionists too. And his channel is growing, the Midas Touch or something like that show, which is growing. That also explains how Gal Gadot is now in the Hall of Fame in the United States, the worst actress ever, and how the Pentagon, the Zionist lobby, and the American government and Hollywood are together for the last 100 years in order to brainwash you and to send the messages that who is the enemy, who is the enemy. And apparently the United States have beat the hook for the last 100 years, believing that the Russians and the Chinese, etc., etc., when it's not true. Of course, we have to have intelligence. Of course, we have to prepare and be prepared for intelligence in the intelligence agencies in order to know and to defend ourselves from viruses, attack, whether it's cyber attacks, etc. But there's no other or more corrupt government than that of the United States, and you will see why.
Anyone who dares try to obstruct or criticize the work of Elon Musk and Doge. Over the course of the first few weeks, the DOJ is turned into an entity that drops cases against those who are loyal to Donald Trump and pursues aggressively investigations against those who are trying to criticize Donald Trump. On February 1st, Trump fires the director of the CFPB and announces plans to shutter the Consumer Financial Protection Board. Again, very much like the NLRB, this is an agency that was, at the moment that it was rendered powerless, investigating Elon Musk and many of the biggest financial backers of Donald Trump. So once again, those that have access to Donald Trump, the billionaires that are close to him, now don't have to worry about labor violations being investigated by the NLRB. Now they don't have to worry about consumer protection actions being taken against them by the CFPB. On February 4th, there is the first of two extraordinary meetings in the White House in which Donald Trump convenes his business partners, the Saudi Golf League and the PGA, to try to negotiate a solution to the dispute between those two golf leagues. Why? Because Trump has a business interest in that dispute being resolved. The Saudi Golf League plays tournaments at Trump's courses in the United States. And so if the White House, using its official power, can try to negotiate a settlement between those two groups, Trump stands to make money. On February 6th, something absolutely stunning happens. Pam Bondi, the AG, issues a memorandum in which she proposes to dull the criminal enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. If you are representing a foreign government before the United States, you have to register so that we know if you are acting on behalf of American interests or you are acting on behalf of foreign interests. In the prior Trump administration, Trump officials got in big trouble for secretly working for and getting paid by foreign governments without registering. Well, what does Trump announce? That they are going to limit the applicability of the enforcement of that statute, making it much easier for Trump's friends, for his MAGA crowd, for the people who show up to Mar-a-Lago, to get paid quietly by foreign governments in order to influence Donald Trump. On February 10th, maybe aside from the meme coin, the most stunning act of corruption, the Eric Adams quid pro quo, in which Eric Adams, indicted for corruption, is let off the hook. His charges are dismissed in exchange for the mayor's pledge of political loyalty to Donald Trump. They literally went on TV and announced the deal, that we're getting rid of the charges against Eric Adams as long as the mayor pledges political loyalty to the president. That was so corrupt that 6 or 7 DOJ officials resigned because they refused to withdraw those charges. But the deal went through because the 7th or the 8th or the 9th official finally filed the withdrawal. And now in America, it is 100% clear that if you want to get away with corruption, if you want to steal from your constituents and you're an elected official in this country, all you have to do is just sign up for political loyalty with Donald Trump, and he will instruct the Department of Justice to let you get away with it. On February 10th, Donald Trump directs the DOJ to pause enforcement of U.S. laws that prohibit companies from paying bribes overseas. Come on. Come on. He instructs the DOJ to pause enforcement of U.S. laws that prohibit companies to pay bribes overseas. Here's an example. Goldman Sachs was engaged in outright bribery. They were paying bribes to Malaysian officials so that they could get a contract to manage the resources of the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund. American companies should not be overseas bribing foreign governments. That compromises America's reputation and America's national security. But now we are going to pause enforcement of the laws that stop American companies from bribing foreign governments because corruption is now being normalized. This is what you do if you want to normalize corruption, is that you make it legal for American companies to engage in corruption overseas. That makes it easier for Trump to get away with corruption here. 2 days later, on February 12th, the announcement comes out that the State Department is going to buy $400 million of armored Teslas. Okay, so now it's getting even more blatant. It's getting even more brazen. The State Department is just going to buy a whole bunch of product from Elon Musk, product that they were not previously scheduled to buy. It is true that the Biden administration had a blueprint that was going to buy some electric vehicles, but it was around $483,000 worth of vehicles. Trump revises that blueprint of spending so that now the federal government is going to spend $400 million on armored Teslas from Elon Musk. Let's see. That's February 12th. That same day, Elon Musk's people infiltrate the Department of Labor, and reporting suggests that during that infiltration, Elon Musk's personal representatives get access to enforcement information at OSHA, not only against Elon Musk's companies, and by the way, SpaceX has an employee injury rate that is 9 times higher than the industry average, but also workplace safety violations against Elon Musk's competitors. Here's the message. If you are close to Donald Trump personally, if you support him politically, you can get secret access to enforcement data against your country, against your companies, and your company's competitors. That's what happens on February 12th. 3 days later, there's some suspicious firings at the FDA, again related to Elon Musk's personal financial interests. Elon Musk owns a medical device company called Neuralink. It is currently being reviewed by the FDA, and guess what? On February 15th and 16th, all over a weekend, there are 20 people fired from the FDA's Office of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices. Fired by DOJ, run by Elon Musk. Clear message. You're going to get fired if you aren't on the right side of Elon Musk's application. Now, whether that was explicit or not, if the guy who is firing you has a pending application before your department, aren't you going to think twice? Aren't you going to think twice about ruling against his interests? This is why this is all unprecedented. Again, this feels normal because it's been happening every day, but never before in American history have we allowed someone who has a pending application for approval of a medicine or a medical device to be able to personally decide who gets hired and who gets fired at the regulatory agency making the decision over that medical device. But now this stuff is happening every day because on February 15th as well, that same weekend, there's an announcement that the FDA cuts are going to be even deeper, perhaps as big as 50%. That means that hundreds of drugs and devices won't get approved at the FDA. And you know who benefits from that? The folks that are selling the snake oil products. And guess who's selling the snake oil products? The people who work for Donald Trump, selling Vita gummy scams. The director of the FBI is selling vaccine reversal pills. When the FDA gets gutted, it's the people who sell those unregulated products who stand to gain. On February 19th, 4 days later, we find out that the IRS is going to be cut by 7,000 people. And the biggest chunk of the folks who are going to be laid off are the people who do the audits of the billionaires and the millionaires and the corporations. And so once again, Elon Musk and the people standing behind Donald Trump on Inauguration Day are going to get off because the IRS just had its enforcement powers, its audit powers, absolutely gutted. That same day, on February 19th, you start to receive word that advertising on Elon Musk's platform is starting to grow again.
And the point is, what is Canada going to do about it? I don't think none of the two prime ministers that have the most option to become prime ministers are the ones to guide our country, our beautiful country. They're going to destroy it. And they're going to start giving up our health care system. Mark my words. They're going to start privatizing the healthcare system that Canada enjoys so much because of the favor that the corruption and the lack of consciousness that the politicians have here in Canada, there in the United States, in the Western tradition, in order to say money talks and bullshit walks. Well, you're full of shit and you're only corrupt with the money that you receive. And as you have seen in the video explaining this, how Donald Trump in just 6 weeks have made billions of dollars and going to carry on doing it, how Elon Musk and friends are going to keep on doing it, how the UK, the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen and all these people are billionaires when they should just live on their salary. And that's not going to happen. The elites are so corrupt that they have taken over our world. And the problem, like I mentioned, is that the state of Israel is the origin of it. Otherwise, explain to me why 37 states in the United States are possessed by them. You cannot speak, you cannot work, you cannot get any position in government, which if you have now any position in government, unless you sign up, okay, I abide by Israel, not by the United States Constitution, but by Israel. If that is not treason to the country, what else is it? And not only that, the whole cabinet of the President of the United States, the cabinet of the last president in the United States, the same with the UK, European tradition, not so I cannot mention always the same, the European tradition and its countries. So let's go to the second video and see why corruption keeps on working that bad.
When Donald Trump campaigned to be U.S. president in 2024, he promised to help working class Americans. Trump even went to a McDonald's and he pretended to be a fast food worker.
This is not a normal situation, is it, huh? How are you? What a good-looking family. How did you produce those good-looking kids?
And he promised, quote, "When I'm president, the McDonald's ice cream machines will work great again," end quote. That is not a joke. He posted that on his official verified Instagram account. But when he actually became president, Donald Trump made it clear that his policies would be serving the rich, not poor and working class Americans. Trump himself is a billionaire, so that's not surprising, but he appointed 13 billionaires to be top-level officials in his administration. This means that the Trump administration represents not just the 1%, that is the richest Americans, but the 0.0001%, which is what billionaires are in terms of the US population. And the collective net worth of Trump's top appointees as of January was more than $460 billion, including Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who at that time in January had more than $400 billion in wealth, although his wealth fell quite a bit by March as there were boycotts of companies like Tesla around the world in protest of Musk and Trump. All U.S. government administrations represent the interests of billionaire elites, but Donald Trump has made it as clear as day. He invited the world's richest and most powerful billionaire oligarchs to his inauguration, and the CEOs of these massive big tech corporations in Silicon Valley were sitting with his cabinet members, which was very symbolic. Then just a few hours after he took office, Trump invited 3 more billionaire oligarchs to the White House to do a press conference about AI. And as president, Trump has been having regular phone calls with some of his billionaire clients, including the billionaire CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager, and it has a direct link to Trump. And he has phone calls with the CEO of BlackRock, and they talk about plans. Like, for instance, BlackRock bought the 2 ports on both sides of the Panama Canal. Meanwhile, Trump has been passing a series of policies through executive order that have benefited rich elites, including he gutted an anti-money laundering law, which essentially gives a green light to money laundering. Trump also ended the enforcement of a U.S. law that banned bribery, essentially giving a green light to bribery as well. So Trump often claims when he was president the first time, he cut taxes on all Americans, including poor and working class Americans. It's not technically wrong, But I mean, come on. He reduced taxes on the poorest Americans by $70. He reduced taxes on the middle class by $900, but he reduced taxes on the rich by $61,000. There's no comparison. But again, Trump supporters may say, well, that's because rich people make much more money than poor people. Okay, well, let's look at percentages, not just the overall sum. If you look at the percentage in increase in after-tax income for the richest 5% of Americans, it increased by around 3%, whereas the poorest 20% of Americans saw their after-tax increase by 0.4%. And middle-class Americans saw their after-tax income increase by about 1.4%. So once again, Trump's policies benefited the rich. The anti-poverty organization Oxfam published a report in 2025 that found that billionaires in the US pay a smaller tax rate than most teachers and retail workers because the US tax code favors income from wealth, that is from capital gains from owning assets, rather than income from work. And also because rich people have loopholes they can find in these laws. They pay a lot of lawyers a lot of money for tax avoidance strategies. And in 2024, billionaire wealth increased by $1.4 trillion over the year, or $3.9 billion per day. And according to a 2021 White House study, the wealthiest 400 billionaire families in the US paid an average federal individual tax rate of just 8.2%, whereas the average American taxpayer in 2021 paid 13%.
I call this of demonic proportions because it is of demonic proportions. What we are seeing in Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras in the last century, everything, the killings and the assassinations, the lies that they told, how they divide and conquer ignorant people, because the people in those countries are ignorant because they don't have money. The elites steal all their money with the accomplices of the United States. You can just go to the CIA, Dulles brothers, etc., and read a little history behind it. And you can read Noam Chomsky also. You can read many other authors. You can read Richard Wolff. You can read, I don't know, Why Nations Fail. This at the time, 2007, I believe it was written. Explains also how the lobbyists work in Central and South America and goes far from history to the first, second, third, and now fourth Industrial Revolution. Well, he didn't touch the fourth revolution, but mention it, etc. So we need to react today, and the wars for independence are back from the elites. The independence have to be from the elites. The separation between super rich corporations, like I've just read what intelligence is all about, and we need to define who our leaders are. You're going to say this is communism? No, this is common sense, idiots. Common sense. Common sense is to distribute the wealth of the country proportionally to its people. The housing program, for example, that nobody has mentioned. I have mentioned the housing program. Mr. Poilievre said that in his populist campaign, the same with the liberal candidate and actual prime minister right now, that the working class people, whether unionized or not, work and build beautiful houses, but they cannot live in them. Of course, because Canada's housing prices are to the top. Nobody can live or afford a house anymore. And why is that? Because they are doing it wrong. They're selling it to BlackRock and many other corporations like Lloyd Banks and others to buy 50,000 houses, for example, or the land, in order for them to make people rent and never have anything, just like it was written in another book during the COVID-19. You will own nothing and be happy. These people are so evil that to kill everybody and to decimate the population of the world, going to wars and throw a few atomic bombs every now and then, anyway, we are terraforming the planet, so it's going to be useful. If you associate everything that I just mentioned, which is Haïm Eshed and Donald Trump understanding of extraterrestrials with the State of Israel, Zionist State of Israel.
Aliens aliens exist and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said the aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are. NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
Hi, Alison. Well, this is quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years, not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected, at least until now. And he said all this in an interview with an Israeli newspaper in Hebrew, but it's really taken off after parts of it were published in English by the Jerusalem Post today. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, I've got nothing to lose. Well, so far, President Trump has not tweeted about this, though remember a year ago, he did set up the Space Force as the fifth branch of the US Armed Forces. Well, we did ask the White House, the Department of Defense and Israeli officials to comment. So far, they have not responded to the NBC News request, and I wonder if they ever will. Alison.
That is in itself a demonic alliance because we don't know anything about it, like Jeffrey Sachs explained it 3 shows ago in my program, or 2 shows ago, how Jeffrey Sachs said you don't know anything about it. Neither do you, when he was speaking to the European Commission almost a month ago.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's renewed all-out killing of Palestinians in Gaza is continuing into its second week, with at least 23 people dead before dawn today, including 7 children. On Monday, an Israeli strike on Beit Lahia killed the noted Al Jazeera journalist Hussam Shabbat. This is Shabbat's colleague, Mahmoud Abu Salameh.
We heard the sound of the explosion near the Indonesian hospital. We rushed immediately at the moment of targeting. At the moment we heard the sound of this explosion, we headed to the place and saw the targeting of our colleague, journalist Hussam Shabbat. We were shocked by the scene. This is our colleague Hussam's car, and this is his blood.
A statement by Hussam Shabbat's team posted after his killing Monday reads in part, quote, "For the past 18 months, I've dedicated every moment of my life to my people. I documented the horrors in northern Gaza minute by minute, determined to show the world the truth they tried to bury," unquote. Shabbat added, "I ask you now, do not stop speaking about Gaza. Do not let the world look away. Keep fighting. Keep telling our stories until Palestine is free." Later in the broadcast, we'll speak to another of Hussam Shabbat's colleagues, Drop Site News editor Sharif Abdelkadous. He'll join us in studio. Separately on Monday, another journalist, Palestine Today correspondent Mohammed Mansour, was killed in an airstrike north of Khan Yunis. In the occupied West Bank, a mob of masked and armed Israeli settlers Monday brutally attacked Hamdan Bilal, the Palestinian Oscar-winning director of the documentary No Other Land. The group of at least 15 settlers also assaulted activists with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. The attack took place in the village of Susia in the Masafar Yatta region. One of Bilal's co-directors, journalist Bassel Adra, said the group entered their village and started the assault shortly after residents broke their daily Ramadan fast. Bilal screamed, "I'm dying," as he was being brutally beaten. He was then loaded while heavily bleeding into an Israeli military vehicle. He has not been seen since.
No one in Canada should ever be afraid to call themselves a Zionist. I am a Zionist.
So, as you can see, the wars for independence are back because we are not independent. We are, on the contrary, submitting, and these people are laughing by shredding the United Nations Charter in front of us, laughing like crazy, and committing genocide. And they will do it to America, to Canadians, to Europeans, to anybody that opposes them. And if that is not demonic, well, I don't know what is demonic, and you should.
Yeah. Nice, right?
But when we see the pastors, the bishops, the Pope, and anybody, you go to the United States gathering with his ministries, in the case of Donald Trump on the daily basis, and there's a pastor there praying, "Oh God, illuminate us, give us all the knowledge." That bullshit. It's nothing but crap. Even the churches are so corrupt in the United States that they don't give a damn about the people's lives or livelihoods whatsoever. They just want to take, give me your money, baby. We have talked about that years before also, and demonstrated how the pastors enrich themselves and how people that believe in God sincerely do whatever it takes to help the pastors in order to receive God's love while they live in poverty. And there's others, middle class and others, that they just like to be part of the hallelujah worship in order to feel that they pertain, or that they are part of the God's club. It's about status, you know. You go to these churches and some other churches, you're welcome. You go, a poor guy to go to a rich church, it's not the same, dude. It's way different. So, and this comes from Constantinople. And Constantine, because Constantine was the ruler of the state and was the representative of the church after the Council of Nicaea, actually. So, since then, they don't pay taxes. Since those days, they're exempt for paying taxes. So, how long is Nicaea Council? 1700 years ago, since they don't pay taxes, etc. So, as you can see, the corruption has developed so long over the centuries that is incredible that October the 7th opened our eyes to the rest of the world, because Netanyahu do us a favor, and that is to see to the abyss, so the abyss can look at us. Remember that saying, that if you look to abyss, be careful because the abyss start looking at you? The abyss have been looking at us because we have been looking to the abyss of corruption, of injustice, of impunity in all the countries in the world, but especially Central South America, Global South, that have been conquered, Africa, colonized by these powers that be in the name of God and country and king and queen and all that crap that shouldn't exist anymore, by the people, for the people, by the people. Democracy, which is death. I have explained that also many times programs before. All right, so now you know a new emergency like the pandemic is coming, and we all gonna die if we don't oppose Russia. That is looking for an atomic hecatomb. That is looking for, like I have said also, just look at my programs. They're gonna bring the war home, dude. It's not like in the days of, remember that movement in the 60s and 70s, Weather Underground, that they needed to open the eyes of Americans in Vietnam. I made a video, it's called From Vietnam to Palestine. Hope you see it and watch it. And it's about how from Vietnam to Palestine, these movements are trying to wake up Americans, but Americans, are they stupid? Are Canadians stupid? Are Europeans stupid? I understand that they're not being represented, but I have to admit that when people have a good standard of living and doesn't affect them whatsoever, they become stupid, because they said in this house we don't speak politics and we don't speak religion. If you don't speak politics and you don't speak religion, you get this, what we have. Threat of war and disease means Europeans need 3-day supplies commission to warn. Europe cannot afford to remain reactive. The European Commission will warn in a strategy to unveiled on Wednesday. Okay, so let's see what other show the mainstream media have prepared for us. That was Politico, the one that you just said. 3 weeks ago, the Center for okay, hold on. The Center for European Policy it says, resolve what Europe needs for war. Half the battle of European security is in the equipment, the other half is in the head. The possible withdrawal of the United States forces from the European continent and the prospect that the Trump administration may not just be indifferent to its security, but outright hostile, have fundamentally reshaped the strategic environment. Not only has an immediate and existential threat emerged to the east, but the alliance systems with the United States for nearly 8 decades, a core pillar of European security, appears to be in disarray. There is no real possibility that European states may have to confront Russia on the battlefield without American support. As a result, deterrence has re-emerged as a key necessity rather than the abstract concept it became after the Cold War. Decision makers in European capitals must carefully assess how to deter a revisionist Russia that may soon be rewarded for its imperial ambitions in Ukraine. The next step, and one that Putin endorsed in 2021, is to effectively dismantle NATO and the idea of collective defense in Europe altogether. 2 things to mention in there. NATO is not a defense alliance. It's an offensive alliance. It proved it in Bosnia and Yugoslavia, Bosnia-Herzegovina. It proved it with Libya when Hillary Clinton laughed about how we saw he's dead and laugh about it. So it's all lies. NATO is an offensive. NATO promised, as we have explained in this program many times before, since 1990 and 1991, especially after the fall of the Berlin Wall, not to expand to the east 1 inch, and it hasn't stopped expanding. Now, the comment that it says that Russia, that may soon be, okay, a deterrent reward for Russia's imperial ambitions in Ukraine. That is a blatant lie. Russia has never had imperial ambitions in Europe. Russia is part of Europe, you idiots. Russia is part of Europe. It's just that it's so big that covers 11 time zones and goes to the east, big time. Covering many countries in the east, having borders many countries in the global south and the Middle East and the Far East. So, but to say that Vladimir Putin's ambitions of empire is bullshit. It's a lie that we cannot tolerate from the mainstream media. All right, because it's not true. If he really wanted to invade Europe, it would have done it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or it would have actually taken Ukraine all over. It has the capacity. It would have done it. We have read here documents before that you, I'm pretty sure, very familiar if you follow my program with. Okay, the next step, and one that Putin endorsed in 2021, is to effectively dismantle NATO and the idea of collective defense in Europe altogether. Europe is not being represented by their politicians and neither by the European Commission, who has been not voted for. The European Commission is nothing but a corrupt elite of idiots that want to take the European politicians in order to make them go to war against Russia. You can see the Friedrich Merz right now saying that, yeah, Germany's going to go to war. We better get ready. Let's weaponize our country. These Russians. Do you know what happened the last time that Germany went against Russia? It got defeated, dude. Do you remember Kursk? Kursk was one, if not one of the most cruelest and crazy operations where two titans came together to annihilate each other against the council of the generals of the panzers divisions and the mechanized cavalry of the German generals. He said to Adolf Hitler, "Hey man, going to Kursk is unnecessary. We don't have no importance there. There's no strategic value in that battle. It doesn't matter. Let's try to invade that side through Kursk." Guess what? All the panzer divisions, Mark III, Mark IV, and Mark V, which was top of the line tanks, gather in Kursk on unnecessary battle of little strategic importance, and they engage in a horrible battle between tanks, mechanized cavalry, and guess who won? Yes, Russia lost 27 million people, but it took over and freed many of the or the first concentration camps. The credit is given again with the State of Israel, Hollywood, and the United States, all for the Americans. You never see in any movie in the United States, here in Canada, or the European Union, or the European tradition, anything that has to do with Russian victory and how Russian cooperated big time in order for the liberation of Europe, dude. If you read a little history, you will find out. But if you believe in Hollywood movies, you're going to be stupid and vote for Donald Trump. And that's what you did. All right. Now the veterans are being destroyed and in the United States. Why? Because the money that goes to the veteran affairs in the United States is taken over by, guess who? Artificial intelligence. I said it before. I repeat it again. I said it 7 years ago when I make a program in transhumanism. I have to remember you. This is the 10th anniversary of React today, which began as the World's Way Out Project. The World's Way Out Project was the initiative I had in order to take the world out of these issues. You know, what issues? War, injustice, corruption, poverty, all these things that affect the world. Using biomimicry and using science. But now science is not trustworthy either. Science is being monopolized by movements. If there's energy sources that we can replace electricity, we don't need copper anymore. Nikola Tesla demonstrated that more than 100 years ago when he stand up with a bulb in his hand and it was live, producing light, big time light. And we start using Wi-Fi, what, 10 years ago maybe? Doesn't that tell you anything about what's going on and why the monopolies work and how the United States and the big corporations, as you just saw in my book, have been working for the last 100 years? And the common factor is Israel, dude. So it's not me saying it. It's the most important thinkers in this world and military strategists like Colonel Scott Ritter, which is not loved in the United States or the government, I mean. But Douglas MacGregor, of course, he's also on that with me and with the people that accompany, of course, this understanding of things. But let's get back to what Europeans said. Broadly speaking, it is a function of capability and resolve. They're going to go like Kursk against Russia. Germany is going to be targeted by Russia like never before. It's going to be the first one to shut the F up because it's going to be destroyed if it goes against Russia. It's going to be the first one to go. France is menacing to go to war against Russia with atomic weapons. And so is the United States using the bombardment, 17 bombs just falling, 17 attacks, actually, not 17 bombs, 17 attacks in the last 48 hours in Yemen. And he's going to use Yemen, of course, as the cabinet of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, and military-industrial complexes speaking through them to the President of the United States and these idiots in the cabinet, whether it's the Pentagon or the Defense Department and all these idiots saying that, yeah, if Iran doesn't dismantle any nuclear energy programs, how stupid that can be. Do you know how long Benjamin Netanyahu have been lying about these matters? 30 years. 30 years. Saying that Iran is going to develop a nuclear weapon. Well, it is an emergency in this case for Iran because it's being menaced by state that has never been inspected, even though we know it has 400 or more nuclear warheads, and it counts with Dolphin submarines that the AUKUS is giving them, and the United States, which are atomic capability submarines, in order to attack Iran. Again, if we attack Iran and Canada takes part on this insane attitude to weaponize Canada, like Europe is asking for $800 billion to weaponize Europe and go to war against Russia, it's the most stupid idea. They don't need to learn because they don't care. And that makes us understand. If they don't care about us, the country and the world, it's because they have somebody guiding them, maybe from up there. Like, again, Jaime Shed said that Trump knows about it.
Aliens exist and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said the aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are. NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
Hi, Alison. Well, this is quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years, not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected, at least until now. And he said all this in an interview with an Israeli newspaper in Hebrew, but it's really taken off after parts of it were published in English by the Jerusalem Post today. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, I've got nothing to lose. Well, so far, President Trump has not tweeted about this, though remember a year ago, he did set up the Space Force as the fifth branch of the US Armed Forces. Well, we did ask the White House, the Department of Defense, and Israeli officials to comment. So far, they have not responded to the NBC News request, and I wonder if they ever will. Alison.
So, when you see this coming, guys, you have to react today to this matter and vote for me. Vote for me. I'm going to run for the next elections as Prime Minister in Canada, and even though this symbolic alternative that I'm presenting myself as for the last few months, I'm not going to make it for the 28th of April in the elections, but maybe for the next one. I hope I'm alive, and Canadians understand that we need a different party. And that if we don't care for us, for the country, for the world, the bombs are going to come home. We're going to bring the war home again, as I have said for the last 5 years. Defense manufacturing capacity remains insufficient, weakening both Ukraine and Europe's ability to rearm. Nevertheless, military preparedness has improved, and most European states now largely recognize that defensive investments are not optional, though insignificant disparities remain. Or surprisingly, geographic proximity to Russia remains a key determinant to defense spending. Second, deterrence requires visible demonstrations of resolve. Capability is meaningless if the adversary doubts our willingness to use it, and this is where Europe's primary weakness lies.
Europe is gearing up for World War III and is preparing survival guides, nuclear bunkers and implementing conscription to survive a possible invasion by Russia. The continent is rearming as it fears Vladimir Putin is only years away from a war to push NATO out of Eastern Europe and rebuild the Russian Empire. The EU believes Russia could attack at some point around 2030 if it is successful in Ukraine, and the Commission has said the bloc must prepare for a large-scale war with Moscow. Countries are preparing their citizens for a brutal fight, with calls for Britain to join the European nations already conscripting their people into growing armies. Civilians are also being prepared on how to deal with surviving an invasion. France is the latest country set to issue an invasion survival how-to guide for its citizens. The 20-page booklet will give advice to French civilians on how to defend the Republic by signing up to reserve units or local defence efforts. The 20-page booklet will give advice to French civilians on how to defend the Republic by signing up to reserve units or local defence efforts if the worst was to happen. It will also have tips on how to create a survival kit, with essentials including 6 litres of water, canned food, batteries and basic medical supplies. Earlier this week, Macron revealed that French fighter jets equipped with a new generation of hypersonic nuclear missiles are now stationed on the border with allied Germany. The Germans sit under the protection of the Gallic nuclear umbrella, something which Poland now also wants. Warsaw is looking at getting nuclear weapon protection from either Paris or Washington DC and is set to implement conscription for all men. Norwegian officials are also preparing for mass evacuation drills for its citizens in some of its most northern towns. The country, which shares a 121-mile border with Russia in the Arctic, is hosting a NATO exercise next year and wants civilians to also take part. Locals will have to flee westward or south into Finland in order to escape the imaginary advancing Russian troops. Local Mayor Toralf Heimdall said, quote, "We cannot have a single Norwegian on the wrong side of the occupation line." Nordic citizens have already been provided with terrifying war survival guides. In November, pamphlets landed in Swedish homes eerily titled, "If Crisis or War Comes," as other Nordic nations have also issued their own chilling advice. Neighbouring Finland has published its advice online and urged civilians to prepare for incidents and crises. Norwegians have received a pamphlet urging residents to know how to manage on their own for a week in the event of extreme weather or war. In summer, Denmark's emergency management agency put out a warning to Danish adults detailing the water, food and medicine necessary to get through 3 days of crisis. Sweden and Finland recently gave up neutrality to join NATO after witnessing the atrocities had unleashed in Ukraine since 2022. Germany's World War III preparation plans have already been revealed in a 1,000-page secret document dubbed Operation Deutschland. According to the Frankfurter Allgemeine, the top secret papers reveal specific buildings and infrastructure facilities that need specific protection in an emergency for military reasons. The government is also drawing up a list of bunkers that could provide shelter to civilians. The Interior Ministry announced underground train stations, car parks, state buildings and private property could all be harnessed for protection. Berlin is also reportedly prepared to move 200,000 vehicles as well as 800,000 NATO troops across its land if the situation with Russia turned to all-out war. In the last couple of weeks, the EU has started a colossal spending plan to rebuild its armies and support Ukraine. The bloc is set to spend as much as €800 billion, which is about £500 billion, on defence as it prepares for its long-term defence. Europe is eyeing building a drone shield from the Baltic to the Black Sea as it looks to deter a Russian invasion and make the possibility too painful for Putin to consider.
Okay, so if you believe all this crap, and there's many people that read this crap and believe it. And why is that? Because the mainstream media and Ursula von der Leyen is saying that we, the people that have common sense, are enemies of the state because we don't want to weaponize and spend billions of dollars for them to give them to the corporations, which I already described what they are. Nothing but knives, bombs, killing, assassinations, and the destruction of the planet, the evolving planet that we can be, in order to have contact with other civilizations in a good way, because I'm pretty sure not all civilizations out there have good faith on us, dude. Especially if Haim Eshed said it about the state of Israel, and we see how Israel and the United States are but one. It's not the United States of America, it's the United States of Israel, dude. 37 states already possessed by the state of Israel. Now, there's many Israelis that are fleeing Israel, yes, but this is unacceptable, and I can't wait to see what the actual prime minister and the new prime minister, whomever wins the new elections, are going to say about rearming Canada. That means that inflation is going to go even higher. The housing prices are going impossible to buy, and everything, and most of the capital, like for the last 50 years, 50 cents of every dollar that you pay in taxes go to armament, and that cannot happen in Canada. Canada can lead the world better. Now, the menaces of the United States of invading Canada, of taking from Greenland to Colombia. That's also one of the reasons I opened this program with the president of Colombia, President Gustavo Petro, because he's one of the few guys in this world that have said, speak the truth. And truth is the worst enemy for the United States of Israel, the state of Israel, and the people that Israel have put in charge in politics in the United States of Israel, the United Kingdom of Israel, and the European Union of Israel. They all work for the Israeli state, whether you like it or not. Prove me wrong, dude. Who put there Keir Starmer? Who put it there? The Israeli lobby, when they destituted the real representative to the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, etc. So I think this is good enough for now. I hope these videos have told you something, because the other part is that I'm going to talk about not what everybody is talking about, which is what the senators' questions were for the representatives in the United States of whatever they think they are, which are, of course, part of the cabinet of President Donald Trump, and that is the director of the National Intelligence Agency, Tulsi Gabbard. That is the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. That is the director of the FBI, Kash Patel. The director of the National Security Agency, Tim Hawk, and Defense Intelligence Agency Director Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz. If this doesn't show you that we're still being lied to by the corporate intelligence that I spoke about in my book, which is only going to bring war, knives, death, and destruction, we need to start calling our God, because we the people need the assistance of our Lord to defeat these idiots. Let's hope that there can be a peaceful revolution here in Canada, there in the United States, in the European tradition countries, the UK, the European Union, New Zealand, and Australia, because the enemies that we have nowadays are so entrenched in the world. It has metastasized like a cancer, even though cancer has been cured for 100 years too, pretty soon, almost 100 years. There has been cured for cancer for 80 years maybe. And they want to destroy us, the country and the world. Let's hope that pacific revolutions can happen when the people unite and vote against the elites, because these are the real enemies of any state in the Western tradition. And not only that, they lie all the time. Who benefits with the drug production? Who benefits with the money that drug produces? Billions and trillions of dollars since 1940. The Americans, the European elites, and all the people that control, through war, everything that has to do with humanity and human understanding. People use drugs, that's for sure. That's right. We need education on that matter, and we need to take that money and reinvest it on the people, so every country in the world can educate themselves and advance to a civilization where everybody is important and has an intellectual capacity enough to understand physics, mathematics, because in the next world where you're not going, all you elites, I hope you don't, you're going to hell, I hope, we are not going to need mathematics anymore. Mathematics are only useful when the physical world leaves, and we live in a physical world. But if you have experienced what I experienced, when you're gone, when you leave the body, mathematics are not needed. You don't need them whatsoever for anything. So now that we are on our own and God has no show up, and I hope it does, we Christians believe Jesus will show up and defeat again, according to John 8, what I just read to you, will come to judge, not to say, oh, I didn't know, I was wrong, I didn't know, I was mistaken. Bullshit. Because even don't blame them for what they're doing. Jesus said, not this time. This time Jesus is coming to judge you and I, us, the country and the world, for what we did or what we did not do when it was necessary. For us, for the country, for the world, much to talk about. Hope to see you next time in the next edition of React Today as part of the World's World Project. But we have to understand in the Western tradition that we have been lied to, and these lies have corrupted to the core, to the bone, each and every politician in Canada and the United States in the Western tradition. For us, for the country, for the world, hope to see you next time, the next edition of React Today as part of the World's World Project. Au revoir. Bye-bye. Hasta pronto. Maranatha, Maranatha, Maranatha.